And this whole series is about developing a mindset as well as the skill set necessary to build life-giving relationships that help us become more and more like Jesus in faith and in character. And what we've said throughout the series, and hopefully this will get stuck in your brains forevermore, is this: show me your friends, and I will show you your future. Show me your friends, and I will show you your future. The friendships that we have reveal the trajectory that we're on. Proverbs chapter 13 says it this way: walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. If you spend time with wise people, if you spend time with people that work hard, if you spend time with people who are intentional in their parenting and invest intentionally into their marriage, and they're passionately pursuing Jesus, and they're not half in, but they're all in with God, chances are you're going to become wise. But a companion of fools suffers harm. So if you spend time with people who are living a double life, or they're foolish with their money, or they spend the weekends at the club, then guess what? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future, right? You spend time with foolish people and you'll become more and more foolish. And so building the right circle of friends isn't just about adding the right friends to our life, but it's about sometimes removing the wrong friends, or at least redefining our friendships with the wrong people. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Today's message is called Unfriending. Unfriending. Several years ago, I was introduced to this framework that helped me separate problems into two different categories, okay? Because some problems, or I guess some obstacles and some barriers that we face, some discomforts, they're problems to be solved. But others are simply tensions that we have to manage, right? So think about it this way. Personal debt, that's a problem that needs to be solved. You got to pay off personal debt. Think about this. The check engine light comes on in your car, right? That's a problem that needs to be solved. Your wife is hungry, right? And if she doesn't get food quickly, guess what? You're going to experience the wrath of her anger. That's a problem that needs to be solved right now. But life is oftentimes more complicated than just the black and white, cut and dry problem to be solved. Sometimes we're faced with a tension that we have to manage, right? My team did not make it to the Super Bowl, but I still want to enjoy the Super Bowl, right? That's a tension that I have to manage, right? I want a clean house, but I have 4 children. That's a tension that I have to manage. As a church leader, sometimes I'll run in circles with other pastors, and they'll ask me like, hey, like, does the Refinery, are they a church that reaches people far from God, or is it a church that helps people grow in their faith? Well, shoot, I want to be both. And I want to be a church that's okay managing the tension of both of them, right? We want to be a church that reaches people who are disconnected from God. But we don't just want to invite them in. We want to help them grow. That's a tension that needs to be managed. Social media is a great tool, but in many ways, it's conditioned us to start thinking about relationships as a problem to solve rather than a tension to manage. How many of you have that friend on social media? They're kind of annoying, and they post way too much, and their long, angry rants fill up your feed. Don't point any fingers. Just raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay, right? So social media has made this very, very easy to solve and create distance in that relationship. One button away to hiding those posts, right? Because they probably have another app that shows you that you unfollowed them. So you just hide their post, right? One button to unfollow, one button to unfriend. No conversation, no tension, just a problem, or just a button. It's a problem to solve. But in real life, it's more complicated than that, isn't it? Friendships require some conversations. It's unwise, it's unloving to simply unfriend or delete somebody from our life. But there are times when you and I need to redefine a relationship with the wrong person in our life because they're hurting us, they're holding us back from what God wants in our life, and they're not helping us grow in our relationship with Jesus. And so today's topic is less about a problem to solve and more about a tension to manage, okay? After graduating high school, my two best friends moved away for college, and they were the strongest Christian friends that I had in my life. And so I had to rebuild my friendship circle. And so I worked at American Eagle, and I started spending more and more time with my friends from American Eagle. Now, they were really kind, but just like many young adults do, they would party on the weekend, and then the parties on the weekend kind of bled into the parties on the weekday, and I started hanging out with them at night, and I lost my spiritual strength, and I began to spend time with them on the weekends, and then, of course, on the weeknights, and I stopped pursuing God for a period of time. Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Though my friendships with these co-workers were thoughtful, caring, they were kind, they were leading me away from God. And I was experiencing the truth of Proverbs 12, where the author says this: the righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. What do the righteous do? They choose their friends what? Carefully. They choose their friends on purpose. I wasn't choosing my friends carefully. I was choosing my friends based on convenience and proximity. And they were leading me away from God. They were leading me astray. Here's what's true. We meet people by chance, but we invest in relationships by choice. Let me say it again. We meet people by chance, but we deepen those relationships by choice. Right? And this leads us to the big idea of today's message. It's impossible to live the right life when you have the wrong friends. It's impossible to live the right life when you have the wrong friends. It's impossible to have great character when you have friends who have bad character. It's impossible to have a strong marriage when you have friends whose marriages are falling apart. It's impossible to have a passionate relationship with Jesus when your closest friends don't follow Jesus with you. It's impossible to live the right life with the wrong friends. The Apostle Paul warns us, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Some of you are thinking right now, well, that's a really good message for them. But I'm different. I'm stronger. I've been following Jesus for a long time. Listen, don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Some of you are going to be tempted this morning to think, man, this message, it doesn't apply to me. But I would say, don't be misled. Show me your friends today, and I'll show you what your life will look like tomorrow. It's impossible to live the right life with the wrong friends. And the idea seems pretty cut and dry, right? Clear, black and white, right? Wrong friends, delete them out of my life. Right friends, invite them in. But as you read about Jesus, he is a friend of sinners. He doesn't unfriend them. He doesn't unfollow them. Jesus says, don't spend time with people who are easily angered. But at the same time, he says, be the light of the world. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to stay? Or are we supposed to run away? The Bible warns us not to be unequally yoked to unbelievers. The Bible also says, go and make disciples or new followers of Jesus. So which is it? What should we do? Well, the answer is both. It's a tension that followers of Jesus have to carry. Because friendships, relationships isn't a problem to solve. It's a tension to manage. Friendship requires us to embrace tension. And as followers of Jesus, we need to be careful not to allow the wrong people to influence us, but at the same time, we must not let our hearts grow cold for people who are disconnected from God. We've got to carry and manage this tension. Okay, every one of us has 3 circles of friendship, okay? And I want to give you a little bit of a framework to start thinking about, okay, well, who do I let influence my life, and who do I need to demote in my life so I can make sure that I have the right influences in and the wrong influences out? Now, what I'm about to share with you, it might be old news. That's okay. I've actually shared this illustration in this church in the past. So here's the deal. All of us have a circle of intimacy. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go I. Circle of intimacy. This is where you take notes, okay? Every single one of us has a circle of friendship in our life called the circle of intimacy. This circle is reserved for one person, the person that you marry. And the Bible's very clear. Marriage is for a man and a woman for a whole lifetime, okay? And so if you don't have a wife or a husband, guess what? This circle of friendship remains empty, reserved, right? We might say, well, but we're in love. Okay, great. Are you married? No. Okay, it remains empty. Well, we're engaged. Great, congratulations. I would love to celebrate with you. But you're not married, so it remains empty. But we've already moved in together. Then move out. There are certain levels of intimacy, certain aspects of our life when it comes to intimacy that are reserved for the circle of intimacy. Listen, it's unwise to share bank accounts before you get married. It's unwise to move in with each other before you get married. The Bible says it's unbiblical and sinful to have sex before marriage. Why? Because marriage is the only relationship that's strong enough for those areas of intimacy in our life, right? Circle of intimacy. Okay. Then, this is going to get harder because the next one starts with I too. Intimacy. Okay. Here we go. The second one is influence. So, influence. Okay? You got the circle of influence. Your circle of influence is for those people who you want to influence your life. They're great at the most important areas of your life. Maybe there's some areas in which you want to grow. Maybe there's some things that are important to you, and they're good at it, or they encourage you to grow in that area of your life. So you want those people here. Why? Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. These are the people you spend the most time with. Some of the people in the group, some of the people in this circle of influence, you might only see once or twice a year, maybe 6 times a year, because you know they're really good at budgeting finances. So you set up a meeting with them and you say, hey, I want you to influence me and my thinking around the area of finances. Your friends who offer you spiritual strength need to be in this circle, the circle of influence, right? If you're a follower of Jesus, the people that are in this circle need to be followers of Jesus. And you need 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 people in that circle. They're not all your best friends, but you've given them permission to influence your life. Okay? Then you have a third circle, and this is called your circle of care. Your circle of care. Now, this circle is very different. This circle is full of people that you care about, but you do not want them influencing your life. They have bad character. They're addicted to spending money, and they're racking up piles of debt. They say they're a Christian, and sometimes they go to church, but they don't live like Jesus. They live with their girlfriend. Their marriage is falling apart, so you need to care for them. You don't want them to influence you. This is the circle of care. Some of you are like, yeah, okay, good. I need to stop hanging out with bank robbers, high-ranking officials, and organized crime, and people who are cooking meth in their kitchen and selling it to fifth graders. And if that's what you're thinking, you're on the right track. But for most of us, it's the friend who's negative and critical about everything and everyone. And they gossip about others. And when you hang out with them, you're not the best version of you. For some of us, it's the person who's always having one or two extra drinks when they shouldn't. For some of us, it's the gal at work that's tempting us to forget that we are married and we have kids at home. For some of us, it's the friend who's moving in the opposite direction of your goals. The circle of care is for those who you care about, but they're not concerned with helping you grow in the most important areas of your life. It's for those who pressure you to make decisions that you know you're going to regret later. And some of you have friends who belong in the circle of care, but you've invited them into your circle of influence. And I will say this, back to the circle of influence. If you're not married right now, you need to be looking for someone in the area of your circle of influence, not your circle of care. Because your spouse is going to be the most influential person when it comes to your parenting, the way that you see your finances, the direction of your marriage, and your spiritual life. When it comes to our circle of friendship, we love everyone the same, but we do not relate to everyone the same. You don't have to let everybody into your circle of influence. Because why? The righteous choose their friends carefully. We love everyone equally, but we don't relate to them equally. Jesus was a master at this, right? Jesus, he loves everybody equally, but he did not relate to everyone equally, right? Jesus had 12 disciples. He didn't have 15. He didn't have 20. He didn't have 25. In fact, he had 12, which means he said no to a lot more people than he said yes. And even within the 12, he had 3 people who he spent more time with. Jesus loved everyone equally, but he did not relate to everyone equally. There were times where the disciples would be looking for Jesus, and there were times when the crowd would want Jesus to come and heal their mom. And Jesus would say, no, I need to go spend time with my Father. I need my roots to grow deep so that my light can burn bright, so that my reach can go far. Jesus loved everyone equally, but he did not relate to everyone equally. There's a group called the Pharisees, spiritual leaders in Jesus' day. And because Jesus was God in human flesh, he loved the Pharisees. But because he was God in human flesh, he loved the Pharisees. But because he was God in human flesh, he did not trust the Pharisees. He loved them, but he did not relate to them like he related to others. Some of you need permission to do the same thing. You love a family member, you love a friend, you love a coworker, but they're leading you astray, and it's time to choose your friends carefully. It's time to put the right friends in the right circle. It's time to redefine some of our friendships so that our faith in Jesus can grow deeper, so that our light can burn brighter and our reach can go farther. It's okay to love everyone equally, yet not relate to them the same way. The friendship circles are helpful, but the question is, how do I figure out who belongs in my circle of influence and who belongs in my circle of care? How do I know when it's time to move a friend from my circle of influence and demote them to my circle of care? And when is it time to promote a friend from the circle of care into my circle of influence? Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to give you 2 things that will never let our friends do, and then one commitment that we will always keep in our relationships, okay? The first thing that I want us to commit to is I will never let my friends distract me from God's plan. I will never let my friends distract me from God's plan. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 13. He says, Jesus turned to Peter and he said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap for me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Peter was one of Jesus' best friends. Now, Peter wasn't perfect. In fact, there were times where Peter's emotions got the best of him, and he took his eyes off of God, and he put his eyes on kind of earthly values. And in a moment of weakness, Peter attempts to distract Jesus from going to the cross. And the words that Jesus uses here for dangerous trap in the Greek, it's scandalon. Scandalon. And it's where we get the word scandal. And a scandal is an action or an event that is seen to be morally wrong or illegal. And so practically speaking, a scandalon was a tool that hunters would use to catch and kill an animal. And what Peter was doing here is, though he was doing it unintentionally, he was laying a trap for Jesus that would hinder him from following God's plan for his life. What did Jesus do? Well, he didn't kick Peter out of his life. He didn't unfriend him. But he did have to manage some tension. And Jesus did have to draw a line in the sand. And I don't know how this plays out in your life, but maybe you have a friend in your life. And they're good people, and you enjoy them. But they're like, "Hey, come hang out with me on Sunday." And you're like, "Well, I got church." "Well, didn't you go to church last Sunday?" They're like, "Well, yeah." "Well, isn't it like one Sunday out of every 3? Isn't that enough?" And for you might need to draw a line in the sand. Like, hey, you're distracting me from God's plan for my life. Some of you, you're going to have a friend who asks for a commitment from you that conflicts with your commitment to your community group. And they're like, "Hey, come hang out with the guys tonight." "Well, sorry, I got community group." "Man, you're always at church. Don't you pray enough?" And you're going to have to draw a line in the sand and say, "Hey, look, you're distracting me from God's plan for my life." Or maybe you're trying to become more generous by giving some of your income to help ministries that are advancing the cause of Christ in our world. But every time you hang out with that one friend, they're always talking about their new thing and the trip that they got to go on. And you find yourself falling more and more and more in love with money and spending money on yourself. And you're going to have to draw a line in the sand and say, "Hey, look, you're distracting me from God's plan for my life." And so as followers of Jesus, we need to make a commitment that we will not let our friends distract us from God's plan. And number 2, we will not let our friends continually tempt me to sin. There's this incredible example of this playing out early on in the Bible in Genesis chapter 39. And the man's name was Joseph. He worked his way up to kind of the ranks of Egyptian leadership. And the Bible tells us that one day, however, no one else was around when Joseph went to work. Potiphar's wife, the king's wife, came and grabbed him by the cloak, demanding, "Come and sleep with me." But Joseph tore himself away, and he left his cloak in her hands, and he ran from the house. And so in a moment where Joseph was all alone with the king's wife, no witnesses, no one would even have found out. She doesn't just invite him to sleep with her. She pressures. She's chasing. She's tempting Joseph to sin. And maybe he could have gotten away with it without anyone knowing, but he doesn't. Instead, he runs. He runs. Some of you are thinking, "What a wuss. Wasn't he spiritually strong enough? Doesn't Joseph realize that she was hurting and lonely and what she really needed was prayer?" No, Joseph was wise. And he was unwilling to have a relationship with someone who was continually tempting him to sin. Maybe you have a friend who's like, gossip, 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 gossip. And they're inviting you into the drama. Come with me. Come hear this juicy gossip. And they're tempting you to sin. And it's time to draw a line and say, hey, look, if this is the way you're going to talk around me, then we can't hang out anymore. Can I give you a free piece of advice? If they're gossiping to you, they're gossiping about you. Men, if hanging out with the guys is always about the hot chicks, oh my gosh, you see that girl? Oh, she's so hot. Check her out. Hey, she was looking at you. And they're constantly tempting you to sin, then it's time to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, look, we can't hang out. You're tempting me to sin. Ladies, as you build a relationship with other women, if they're always talking bad about men, if they're constantly talking poorly about their husband, and they're tempting you, oh, what's the dirt on your husband? But you want to stay, you want to honor your husband, you want to respect your husband, then it might be time to draw a line in the sand. Say, hey, look, if when we get together, you're going to talk like that about your husband, then we can't hang out because you're tempting me to sin. You've got to draw a line in the sand. I'm unwilling to build relationships with people who are distracting me from God's plan and constantly tempting me to sin. When I started following Jesus in high school, I got super serious about my faith, but I had some friends, and they were inviting me to parties, and they were like, hey, there's these really cute girls. They like you. And I had to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, look, I can't hang out with you. You're distracting me from God's best for my life. Over the years, I've had amazing friendships. I've developed some really good friendships with some followers of Jesus. And at one point, they were friends in my life who they were chasing after God, and we were side by side, encouraging one another, giving each other spiritual strength, praying for each other, challenging each other. But at some point down the line, they stopped chasing God. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, I don't want their decisions to influence me. So what did I have to do? I had to draw a line in the sand. I had to demote some friends. I had to enter into the tension of this relationship and say, hey, look, we can't hang out as often as I'd like to because you're influencing me in a direction I don't want to go. If you want to follow Jesus, and if you want to grow your roots deep in the Lord, and if you want your light to burn bright, and you want to have impact in your workplace, and in your community, and in your family, then you need to have the right people in the right circles. You've got to get extremely intentional when it comes to your friendships. I mean extremely intentional. You got to promote the right friends into the right circle. You got to demote the wrong friends into the right circle. Why? Because it's impossible to live the right life with the wrong friends. Here's the tension, and it's the commitment that we all need to make in all of our relationships, and it's this. The one thing I promise, and the one thing that I will always do, no matter who it is or what relationship, and it's this. I'm going to love people with the unconditional love of Christ. I'm going to love people with the unconditional love of Christ. Jesus says this way, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. My spiritual father, a mentor in my life, his name is Chris Kainu. He said this statement over and over and over and over again, and now it lives in my bones. Love is unconditional, but relationship is conditional. Let me say it again. Love is unconditional, but relationship, it actually is conditional. It's not just conditional on a human level, it's actually conditional on a spiritual level as well. God loves everybody. God loves everybody. Everybody deserves God's love. They deserve God's love from God. They deserve God's love from and through you. And this is the tension. As followers of Jesus who want to practice a lifelong, passionate, and faithful relationship with Jesus, we have to manage the tension. I got to love everybody, but I can't relate to everyone the same. Why? Because it's impossible to live the right life with the wrong friends. So here's what I want to do. I want to throw up these questions, and I just want you to snap these questions with your phone. And I want to encourage you to take some time this week. This is very pointed. And ask yourself, prayerfully, go to God, be like, okay, what relationships need to be redefined? Who do you need to promote to the circle of influence? And who do you need to demote to the circle of care? We've got to get the right people in the right circle. For those of you who are exploring faith in Jesus, and maybe you're here, you're ready to take your next step with God, this idea of love is unconditional, but relationship is conditional. It's true with God. Here's the deal. There's nothing you could do to earn more of God's love, and there's nothing you could do to lose God's love for you. You have all of God's love. Everything He has to offer. He loves you. But the fact of the matter is, relationship with God is conditional. Let me read a passage of the Bible that describes this. Romans chapter 10, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved, right? For it's with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it's with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. You have all of God's love. All of it. He hasn't held any of it back. But the passage starts with an if. If you want to be in relationship with God. If you want His forgiveness. He's not going to force it on you. It has to be received. So today, I want to encourage you to take your next step with God. If you're here and you're exploring faith and you're ready to take your next step, you can meet that condition by simply saying, God, I believe that Jesus is who He said He is, that He died on the cross for the forgiveness of my sins, that He came back to new life. So stand up. If you're here, go ahead, stand up. We're going to pray together. If you're here this morning and you're ready to take that next step with God,